CGLCC's LGBT+ Global Business Summit, Illuminate. My name is Jennifer Cooke, as you just heard, the Director of Inclusive Trade at Export Development Canada. And we are a proud sponsor of the summit and of this next session. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all today, and of course, to once again be gathering in person. I'm also pleased to open the first plenary session today on one of my favorite topics, exporting and global business. For those of you unfamiliar with Export Development Canada, EDC, we are Canada's export credit agency, a Crown corporation dedicated to helping Canadian companies succeed on the world stage. As international risk experts, we equip Canadian companies with the tools they need, the trade knowledge, financing solutions, equity, insurance, and international connections to grow their business with confidence. And underlying all of our support is a commitment to sustainable and responsible business. We know that exports create jobs, promote innovation, and grow industries. Moreover, when exporting is viewed through an inclusive lens, it can advance the interest of groups who have faced barriers to trade to help their business grow and succeed, positively impacting our economy and our communities. Since joining the CGLCC as a corporate partner 4 years ago, Export Development Canada has been implementing supplier diversity, we have doubled our inclusive trade team, and we've launched an inclusive trade investments program to better support Canada's diverse-owned and led companies. EDC's solutions are, of course, available to all Canadian exporters. But that said, we believe that targeted support for businesses owned by members of various equity-seeking groups who have a lower awareness or harder time accessing our programs will help ensure that our solutions are relevant and accessible so that more Canadians benefit from engaging in trade. We want to ensure that all Canadians have the same opportunities to dream big, be daring, and take on the world. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next session, Whose Business Is It Anyways? A panel discussion moderated by CGLCC's very own Global Manager, Elliott. Please welcome Cass.
Nice seeing you with legs. Edwin, you can come up. Yeah, okay. Oh, do we have the mic for Edwin as well? Sorry. Thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Good morning, everyone. So today's session, Whose Business Is It Anyway, is meant to explore the personal, outward, inward commitment that all LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs and suppliers are forced to take on when doing business, but also when going global. I'm excited to share our panel with you, and as a reminder, the speakers' full bios are available in the event page under the speaker tab if you're online or you want to check them out after. First, I want to introduce Connie Stacey of Growing Greener Innovations, President and all-around CGLCC veteran and champion. Oh, there we are. Connie joins us today with an extensive recognition and awards for her innovative approach to business and change-making. She is a great wit, a thoughtful advocate by example, and a leader in global innovation. Kanishka Chaudhry, co-founder and chief impact officer of Samavesh Chamber of Commerce, India's first LGBTQI+ and ethnic minority-run Chamber of Commerce, one of CGLCC's Global's most charming and insightful collaborators abroad. Kanishka and Samavesh organization are also one of the 2 international co-recipients of the Active Fund, along with CGLCC, a new project committed to supporting economic inclusion of all persons, and specifically for us with India and Thailand, which is where our next speaker comes in. Ryan Figueiredo, Executive Director of Equal Asia Foundation, who's in the midst of his own world speaking tour, and that background is makes him seem like he's much more local than he is, but he's somewhere off jet setting. So he will be a welcome addition as well with his incredible insights on this topic. And lastly, Edwin, who's joining me here in person, is one of our special delegates here from Colombia. So he flew in yesterday, despite many travel delays in the process for everybody. And he's joining us here from Findeter, which is a private and public bridge project in Colombia where they focus on providing financing and support with inclusive social practices for infrastructure projects within Colombia. So I want to go ahead and open everything up right off the bat. My first question is to you, Connie. What does it take to show up as yourself on a global business stage, and why is that important for you to be present and visible?
Well, it's a number of things. Certainly, like many people, it was difficult to be out and open when I was young. And things have improved a long ways over the years, but it's still got a ways to go, particularly when it comes to how we deal with business and business internationally. So for me, being able to be myself is important, partly because it's also widening a path for those who come after us. So for me, I kind of look back to the kid I was and would like to make that a little bit of an easier journey for the people coming after me. So that's certainly a big part of the why for me. In terms of what it takes to show up and do it, it's courage. A lot of it is courage and finding support where we can. So groups like CGLCC, EDC, and the Global Trade Commissioners are big parts of that.
So Connie, you mentioned to me too before that you try to make it a priority to come out early when you're in introductions. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how you actually do that in conversation with folks?
Yeah, you bet. I always, probably first 5 minutes of any given conversation, drop something that makes it clear that I identify as queer. In some ways, it might be a reference to being married to a woman. It might just flat out be announcing that I'm gay. But I think it's a really important thing to do because it sets a stage and an expectation that says, this is who I am. I'm not going to hide who I am. And one of the things I really find is interesting side effect of that is it really tells me a lot about the room and sometimes even the age about a room or a presentation. So I actually have found that with people, I'm Gen X, and when I speak with other Gen X people, they're like, oh yeah, I get it, that's really important. And when I talk to students in college right now, for example, they're like, and? Which is a wonderful thing because it doesn't even occur to them that that should be an issue. My hope is that we get to that point everywhere. So that's a big part of why I certainly make a point of outing myself early in a conversation.
Thank you, Connie. Sorry, just one quick note too. The timer isn't actually happening up here, so I could easily fill the afternoon. So if someone could press go on that, that'd be great. Thank you. So Ryan, I'm wondering if you want to jump in here. I know that your work within the Active project is a little bit different than Samavesh in that you're supporting different groups of people, different groups of workers where LGBT people are more likely to be employed. So situations like gig economy, tourism, where they have sort of the independence and that lack of vulnerability of fear from an employer. I'm wondering how you address the issue of visibility and finding the folks that we're trying to support and uphold, as well as sort of what the whole visibility question means for you.
Thanks, Cass, for the introduction. It's so lovely to be here with all of you. And it's easy to forget that a large proportion of our economy is driven in the informal sector. And we were just wondering, why is our community poor? Why are they homeless? Why are they suffering from all these issues, whether it's on mental health or well-being? And it came to us, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it came to us a surprise that we were forgetting all of those who were and who are invisible in our community. And I think it's just leaning into that. I think that it required us to ask some very deep questions and be a little more intentional about our programming. I think I wanted to kind of follow that up by saying that visibility is not only about our sexual orientation and gender identity. I think we can be queer in many other ways, and it's when we recognize and accept this queerness in all of us, I think we're able to then kind of demonstrate a very different kind, a very radical kind of solidarity in the kind of work that we do for social justice. The work of that's supported by the Active Grant is really a leap of faith in that direction. I think if we address this aspect of poverty in our communities, we may have moved the needle on addressing other social justice issues in the communities that we live in, not just LGBTI communities. So that's really the big idea. And that is really where I think this visibility can in a sense become a tool for radical inclusion of other groups as well. We're not only LGBTI, we're also refugees, we're people living with HIV, we're people survivors of intimate partner violence. We have so many dimensions to ourselves, and I think this is the visibility that we're hoping to kind of generate.
Yeah, and Kanishka, I'm wondering if maybe you could say a little bit more about this as well, because certainly when we're talking about there's a lot of different versions of queerness and a lot of different equity-seeking groups and minorities. It's a pretty big component of what Samavesh's work is, to be visible, to take up a lot of space, to try to be an advocate for many. So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, for India is huge when it comes to intersectionalities. We have a 3.2 million square kilometer landmass, 1.36 billion people. We have 22 official languages which are spoken in 19,500 dialects. We have more than 10 religions. We celebrated around 36 major festivals. We have 500 ethnic minority tribes and around 3,000 castes. We have 11 types of identified sexual orientations and 58 identified gender identities and expressions. So
wow.
Like this place is humongous when it comes to diversity. Sometimes I feel very confused. How have we coexisted so far? It's a miracle. So, but yes, sometimes opportunities do exist when it comes to coming together and having a common frame of work towards approaching a common problem, right? It is but imminent that there will be intersectionalities in India for the LGBTIQ people. There'll be these layers of intersectionalities. Now, just to give you an idea, we learned from the women's rights movement in 1800s in India. 1900s was focused on ethnic minority movement, and now it is the LGBTIQ movements that are picking up. And we have all these different layers of ethnic minorities as well as other minorities which are part of the LGBTIQ group. So not just from a learning perspective, but from even magnifying our voices when we reach out to different government institutions as well as corporates, as well as other majority populations, and making that change.
Right.
These intersectional groups have to come together.
I love that idea.
We have to identify our differences.
Yeah,
and then appreciate them and take it together forward.
I love that idea of what you're saying too, of learning from some of the past movements and past examples, and then readily sharing that information with the other groups that are maybe a little bit further along in the process, but able to shoulder some of the path previously carved with you and share that responsibility for pushing everybody into a space of more inclusion. And certainly the sheer volume of the stats you were just mentioning about how many different layers there are within it, the Indian population is pretty impressive. I guess my next question then would be for you, Edwin. And what we're kind of getting from Kanishka here is this idea too of some initial steps potentially leading to more steps down the road towards inclusion. I know that with your work, part of the mandate of receiving support from Findeter and receiving funding is that they need to have a social inclusion framework within the practice of delivering whatever the services are for the project. Could you talk a little bit about, I guess, what that's like and how some of these initial steps maybe lead to further steps?
Well, because it was at the beginning it was hard because talking about gender equality and social inclusion in a city like Bogota, that is a big city, is like a common language. But if you go into the countryside, to the small city, that is you cannot find that kind of
right.
or speech. So at the beginning it was hard trying to figure out how we're going to improve in the small cities or medium cities, the language, the understanding of what that means to be inclusive in projects. We start with the first project that we made. It was in Manizales. That was a city around 500,000 of people, so it's a small city, considered with our rates. But at the beginning, it was hard to face it with the local governments as well with our works, with the team works inside our company, because it was not the language that used to be. I'm a lawyer, I know what that means, be a gender equality or social inclusion. But if you're talking with the engineer, when you're talking with the architect, so it's not the usual word. So we have to start making work inside our company, and then we have to start to face it with the local governments, with the other groups that we're going to face that work. But yes, it was a hard work.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Ryan, maybe if you have something around to mention too about shared experience, maybe between trying to find, to empower the people that you're trying to work and support with a shared language to then be able to actually work together. How are you finding that's being received in Thailand, where I know you're kind of coming out of the blue for some people?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the work that we're doing is not without its critics. There is a very little understanding on who in the LGBTI community is located in the gig sector or in the informal sector. I think part of our work is identifying where our community is located in this informal economy in Thailand. And it became easier for us to do that because we realized COVID-19 had really hit Thailand in a big way, because tourism is the mainstay of its economy, and we began to see drag artists, a whole set of people who were actually part of the tourism sector who were impacted by the pandemic, and it was an opportunity for us to now create this conversation around why are you impacted by this? What role were you playing in this kind of informal economy? What else do you do besides that? And what are you doing now to substitute the income that you lost? And I guess it's this bringing together of people understanding what their trauma has been through this experience, and trying to kind of figure out, what it is that our communities have been doing all this time in the informal sector. So creating a common language is part of the project that we are undertaking, but also having a little more nuanced understanding of, how this sector is actually populated by, our communities and what it is that they do in the economy.
Yeah, and Edwin, I know that you had mentioned too that because the social framework is mandated in your work, that sometimes the organizations that you're working with then, because they're forced to apply that in how they deliver service and they invest that energy into doing that work, they then take that same practice and bring it internally into their own treatment of employees, their own practices internally in the company. Is there a specific case that pops out for you about that, or what was maybe the transport project you mentioned?
Yes, the project that I was talking about, there was the first one that we made with the social inclusion vision. Actually, it was the first transit system in Colombia that we designed with the social and gender inclusion. So
the entire transit system is designed to be gender inclusive right from the beginning, social, trans,
everything that we start to make a conversation with the focus group, with the LGBT community and with the women, with all kind of ages. So we start to make a conversation, what they needed, what they want for the system, and what the already system that is running is lack. So we start to face it and start to make the conversation with the groups. And after that, we talk with the designers, with the financial, with the engineers and everything. It wasn't a topic that they have to search and they have to think about it in every single step in our project.
Right, and so putting yourself into that framework gives you the space to start to be able to think about how else you could apply it.
Yes, some example that I can give to you is one of the routes that is on the city in Manizales. Especially the trans community, they don't have, the transgender community, they don't have a route that connect the pink zone that we call it in Colombia, where is with all the groups they are reunited or where they make together with the neighborhood. So they didn't have that. We designed a special route that we're going to connect the pink zone with the neighborhoods, but as well, they said, okay, you can connect me, but how is going to be the treatment with the drivers when I'm going to get into the system? And how is the security in the bus station? So we decided the whole chain of security, treatment with dignity to the people. So it's that simple example that you can figure out that the whole system is going to welcome all kind of people in this city.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty massive project to think of designing an entire transit system around gender equity inclusion, but it sounds like an excellent space. You mentioned too asking folks what they need and how to support them. Connie, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what supports you in kind of doing and being able to do this work to be as big of a global innovator as you are and as out and proud and present as you are.
Well, there's a few things there. Partly, I always approach everything in terms of when I'm going internationally or even within Canada. I'm not sure that my picture is beside the word lesbian in Wikipedia. It's probably close. I'm not exactly a part of the invisible part of the community. I do fit the stereotype, so people often make that assumption. And with that assumption comes behaviors. So when I approach kind of my global travel and business, first off, I always kind of set the stage that there is no perfect place where there is zero discrimination. In Canada, I think the numbers are probably always changing, but something like 85% acceptance. Well, that means when I go to a conference in a few weeks and there are thousands of people out there, there are hundreds who don't believe in my lifestyle, who don't think I should have the right to be married to my wife, and don't agree with a lot of things, and that's Canada. There are other parts in the world where I think Kenya is like 7% acceptance, and I have to be able to be discreet in what I do in order to be safe. So one of those things, and that's a particularly interesting one for us because a lot of the work that we do, and just to kind of get a little preference, we manufacture very intelligent battery systems, which are used in renewables. Well, guess what? A lot of the demand we have for our products is in areas like Africa and rural areas where acceptance is often very low. So that kind of puts me in an interesting spot because those are often people I'm very much keen to help, but aren't necessarily super accepting. So one of the things that I do in assessing it is, of course, there's always Google is a good place to start. What are the laws in any particular region? Often if I'm going to a new area, my first point of contact is the Trade Commissioner Service through Global Affairs. I feel personally the Global Affairs team and EDC are like this 1-2 punch, Canada's best kept secret. I find that trade missions are often my best way in because it gives me that security. Right. And I've had bad experiences traveling internationally for business. And, when they have been in scenarios with Government of Canada people beside me, they're right there to support me and make sure that there's no risk to me, that I'm comfortable and I feel supported. And that goes a long way. Because let's face it, if you're going into a business scenario or a business meeting and you're afraid to speak or afraid to be yourself, you're probably not going to do your best sales pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great plug. If you are not yet signed up and are a certified diverse supplier, we are going to Las Vegas on a trade mission very shortly. So please sign up for that or speak with me after. Also, I totally relate, Connie. My shirt is my dead giveaway, I think, today. Under here, it's got enough of the stereotypical flair. So not necessarily going to the Wikipedia page, but certainly representative. Kanishka, maybe this is a good time to ask you, since it sort of directly relates, and Connie works with CGLCC in a way that you are starting to work with more members in India. What's sort of why does Samavesh need to exist, and what's sort of the value of having a chamber like yours operating in India?
Sure, Cass, and thank you, Connie. I mean, thank you for sharing. It's really inspiring. Thank you. We have been asked this question multiple times within India as well. All the founders of Samavesh are people from the corporate world. we either run our own businesses, or we are in the corporate world, heading different departments, so diversity, inclusion, etc. And that is the reason when we thought we need to give back, when we took a look at the models of NGLCC, CGLCC, etc., we found that it definitely gives a very defined set of value addition to the community, in terms of its growth, in terms of its sheer visibility to the rest of the population, and starting that conversation about the community across every single corporate as well as household. Now, this is what we passionately believed in, but we actually based the foundation of Samavesh on research. We did primary research, secondary research, as well as some roundtables. Secondary research actually showcased that India loses around $50 billion annually just for the cost of phobias, be homophobia, transphobia, etc., related to alternate gender identity or sexual orientations. You translate that into opportunity. There is a nominal income of $37 billion to $121 billion. And this has been actually captured of Forbes, out now, MSL Group research as well. That is going, that is not being actually, I would say, approached sensitively by the marketers of different brands. So they're losing out on this huge market. Interestingly, 25% of this particular $37 to $120 billion is also coming from that intersectionality of LGBTIQ folks, which are of ethnic minorities, whose incomes are lower by 30% than the national average. Now, in a roundtable, we found that the government needs support in understanding what the community needs so that they can frame better policies. The corporates need support in terms of localizing their global policies. The corporates also need support in getting their inclusion lens when they are framing their other business policies, as well as, of course, the community requires enablement, empowerment, etc. So all of these came in from the roundtable. We did a survey as well. 89% of the 1,000+ respondents said that the need of a central resource to drive D&I in the country, create those benchmarks, which are currently non-existent, is very much required. And this was across tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 towns, across income levels. So we are very thankful to CGLCC, the Economic Rescue Project, our association with CGLCC, Equal Asia Foundation, our amazing mentor, Deborah, and our advisory board, our 35+ local and equal number of different intersectional partners across the world, who have shared their learnings on how you have done it in your geographies, how you have done it in your areas of influence, how you have done it within your communities. And we take that and we learn from that, and we try to do something meaningful that may impact in our own humble, small way within the community here from an economic inclusion perspective.
Yeah, and I think
Collaborative solutionizing is the key for us right now.
I think it's interesting too when we talk about taking up space as yourself and being visible on the stage. There's this sort of constant rhythm of needing to support, sharing strategies, sharing support. I know you mentioned too, Samavesh kind of coming into being really from a research-heavy base and making that business case to corporations, to members of what the value is of working inclusively, which is certainly something Equal Asia Foundation, CGLCC does as well. Connie, you mentioned too as well that a big part for you of how you actually put this into practice into the work is that you make decisions first as a business decision, and then you look at adapting, I guess, what it means to be your full self in the work you're doing from that point. Could you add a little bit about that?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, there's two different things there. I mean, I'm always an advocate for LGBT rights and equality globally. But in a business setting, I also have to make the first and foremost choice has to be that related to business. Does it make sense to do it? I don't go to countries just because, I think that being out there will be, a good thing for their local area. It has to be good for business too. And I think that all of the other speakers have hit on something really important, which is about the size of the economy or the opportunity. And it always blows my mind a little bit how often people kind of miss the obvious. But if you think that roughly 15%, and that's being very modest, 15 to 20% of the population globally identifies as being part of the queer community in some way. That would make us the largest country in the world by population. It'd be somewhere in the range of 1.5 billion people. That's an awful lot of people and an awful lot of economy, and opportunity to think of. I mean, that's really quite dramatic, let's say. So, I mean, from that perspective, as a business that services that community, I mean, what an opportunity. And as someone who is in that community that services other industries, I don't think I should need to be hiding who I am. I think it's really important to be out there and make that part of the business I do. But you're right, it has to start with a business need. You wouldn't have much of a business for very long if you started making your decisions for purposes that weren't primary
Right.
to your business.
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder too, because a lot of times the nobility of the work, or the noble mission of sort of being present, being out there, especially for those of us in a sort of social development space or a nonprofit space, the work itself, or the idea of the work itself is great, but if it's not viable and if it's not being meaningfully supported, that staff aren't being able to be compensated, that you don't have funding, that you don't have streams of, watching your bottom line, that it's important to still remember LGBT businesses are businesses, LGBT organizations are organizations, and they need to operate. This, a little bit of a pivot, we're talking about how being able to be yourself in the ways that you can, that work and are safe and healthy for you, can be, quite charging, can lead to more change for other folks, can sort of carve out more space for the person coming up behind you. But it is, I find it a little bit of a paradox where it's equally exhausting sometimes, and there is a labor that's shifted to equity-seeking groups to have to come out, to have to educate, to have to look for shared common knowledge, to have to put that mental energy in to adapt into spaces. I'm wondering, maybe on a more personal level for each of you, what are some of the ways that you stay energized, or what are some of the motivations, I guess, for someone who hasn't mentioned it, around what sort of calls you or pushes you to, keep going, keep doing this work visibly? How do you sort of recharge? Maybe Ryan, do you want to start?
I was fearing you'd ask me first.
We can go to someone else if you don't want to.
No, I think this is the work that we do is hard. I think we're constantly called, like you said, to kind of revisit our trauma and those not so pleasant experiences. But I think the work that we do is also joyful. And I think what really energizes me when I'm not feeling great is this sense that I think the work that we are doing is not only kind of advancing the rights for a few, but it's really making the world a better place. And I think this is what I think we should be doing more of, is not focusing only on our limited set of rights, but advancing social justice issues more broadly. And I think it is this, this opening up to this idea that we are queer in so many different ways, not just our gender identity and sexual orientation, but that we all have, parts of us that require healing. And if we look and we expand that view to our communities and to our world, we are able to be much more effective. I think this kind of openness is something that will really energize not only individual activists and advocates, but also the movement as a whole. I think this, what Kanishka spoke about is, when the LGBTI movement begins to embrace other social justice issues, whether it's climate change, or whether it's refugee rights, we'll be able to kind of do our work much more effectively and be really effective in what we are doing within our own communities. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, great. Edwin, what about for you? What is it sort of that you do that's recharging or energizing? Or you mentioned a little bit too in a Colombian context, maybe initially the topic was a bit out of step and has been embraced a lot more since then.
Yes. Well, I have to say, I was agree with Connie, what she said. It's the same for me. I'm out or proud. I just don't come out I destroyed the closet. So for me, it was like that. And since that, I just, one simple example, I was talking with the local government, I remember, and he was talking to me, oh, you are single? And I said, yes, I'm single. And he said, when are you going to get married? And I said, once they approve the equal marriage, I'm going to get married. So since then, I just trying to make sure that everybody knows that I'm gay, because I'm proud, because that gives me peaceful to my soul, to who I am. So for me, it's like my biggest gift that I receive for the life. So for me, every single step, every single job, or every single talk with government, with people, with my coworkers, that for me is like a gift, and as well it's a full of energy, because I know it's a lot of people behind me. So it's a lot of people. Since I started talking inside my company about LGBT issues, like normally, it's a lot of people that are coming to me, oh, hi Edwin, how are you doing? But it's a start conversation. For me, that is how I get energy, because I know that I'm doing something good for the people.
Yeah. I like this idea of starting kind of, wherever you're at in the space that you're at, and just following those pieces. But also what, Ryan, you were mentioning about being open, being a pretty big source of strength. So not just declaring your LGBT status, but also being open, I think, about where we're at in the process of that day's interactions of living as an LGBT business person or employee or worker. Sharing the tiredness that we're kind of all mentioning here in different ways, being able to be a little bit vulnerable with saying, that's not something that I'm able to take on. Kanishka, do you have anything you want to add about this energizing question?
Oh, well, I would just quote my mentor unabashedly, Deborah, when she told me that you need to sometimes stop, reflect, and celebrate what you have achieved. And look forward and then go ahead full steam. So something that I'm very proud of that we did about the SMILE initiative with the government of India was to that came out for trans persons, was to advise them on including trans persons in their skill development livelihood trainings. And that came out as a nationwide program in India on the Trans Visibility Day. It was not just us, but other organizations as well who contributed to that. But we were pushing more from a economic advisory perspective, while they were pushing more from a social advisory perspective. So everybody worked together towards that. And that was one key thing that I'm very proud of, that energized us. Every time my nephew says that who is a husband and a husband, who is a wife and a wife, it doesn't matter to him. And he's 8 years old. Just brings a smile to my face that whatever we are doing something right there.
Yeah.
And the third thing is that my team, my advisory board, my partners like yourself, Ryan, we NGLCC, etc. We are amazing people that we are associated with. You all have motivated us, energized us, and you keep doing that. I don't know how you do that, but you keep doing that. And thank you for that.
Well, I would like to say that this event is a great way to do that. We all get to come together and share some energizing moments. But that's a great segue to Kanishka into celebrating some of the stuff that's worked. So maybe this is a good chance to open it up to if there's a specific project or a specific thing that you're sort of seeing develop as a result of being visible, taking up space, doing this advocacy work, carving out this path. Maybe Ryan, do you have an example of something that's going well, or some murmurings in the background that are starting to happen as a result of all of this? Something to celebrate?
I guess the Active project was a stepping stone for us to do more work around LGBTI migrants, and especially those who are at risk of trafficking. We've seen what is happening in Sri Lanka and a couple of other economies in our region that are experiencing some form of distress. But I don't think till now anybody has been able to kind of study how LGBTI people fit into this conversation. And so we are moving towards an exciting new partnership to kind of do a 5-year project on LGBTI persons at risk of being trafficked because of economic distress in their countries. And so these are the kind of things that I feel that this kind of future-proofing work that we can do will really close the loop around the conversation of economic empowerment and financial citizenship in our communities.
That's great. Connie, I know it's a little bit of an abstract application for you, but maybe if there's something you want to celebrate, you're happy to jump in as well.
Well, you know what, I'll actually pass the kudos on, because I think that my experiences suggest that what work is being done by the CGLCC and each of the different parties represented today is that of all of the potential business events I go to in any given year, going to the CGLCC summit, unfortunately this year it has to be virtual for me, and going to the NGLCC summit in the US is my most important business trips. When I go to the NGLCC event in Las Vegas, I know that will draw the most business for me of any event I go to in the entire year. And people are going out of their way to find opportunities to work with me. Yeah. Because I'm LGBT, because I identify as queer, and I get to be my full authentic self, and it's amazing. I get to be 100% me, and that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I mean, also a good reminder too for folks that there, I think it's 150, 200 that were joining us virtually today. So, you know, as we move into these hybrid models, it's a bit interesting, but if you are looking to log on online as well and connect with people, you can do that throughout the duration. Is there anything that you want to share about this, Edwin?
Well, that's everybody was saying. In my company, it's a business decision that we are going to make all the projects with the inclusion decision, because in the way we're gonna search for resource out the country. And as well, I think it's a great opportunity to talk about that in all kind of projects that we are developing around the country, because it's an easy way to talk in the big cities, but how you can talk about that in the small cities.
Right.
So yes.
Right. No, that's great. Well, I'd love to open it up if there are one or two questions from anybody out in this space, or any of our speakers, since you're not actually able to sit around each other and ask super casually questions to each other. Maybe if anyone has something someone else said they want to follow up on, now's a perfect time as well. I can't see super well, so maybe just project if you're if there's a question out there. I see the mic running, so.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. My name is Jamin Patel. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm representing Schulich Pride Alliance from Schulich School of Business. Before I ask my question, as an Indian myself, as an international student, it makes me feel a lot of pride seeing India represented on the panel, so thank you so much for being visible. So my question before I ask my question, I want to state the phrase. I don't know if you've heard this phrase, "We are here, we are queer, get used to it." Have you heard about this? I think it's a Lady Gaga lyric, I don't know. But yeah, so the last phrase of it is get used to it, and we usually direct this towards the heterosexual community or the majority community. But I want to redirect this phrase within the queer community in itself, because the hardest steps for queer people is usually coming out, but what's after coming out is getting used to your queerness. So it's open to all the people on the panel. Do you have any words of wisdom of how can a queer individual, especially us youth, can get used to our queerness, where we have to sometimes deal with the issues after coming out, like the self-esteem issues or the struggle with shame within the workplace as well? So how do we deal with that? How do we become self-confident? Like Connie, you're always I'm out and proud. But how do we get to that point? Yeah. Coming out is not enough.
Well, I'll kick that off since you've pointed that last comment at me. I actually think one of the best and most successful ways I've gone is through mentors. And it might not be a formal thing. It might simply be reaching out to somebody in your organization or somebody that's a little bit older that you know is queer and has gone through similar experiences, and just have a coffee, buy them a coffee, You know, $5 Starbucks coffee goes a long way when it comes to advice from somebody who's been there and done it. And it really, to me, that's probably the most valuable advice you can get, and it's there. I find that if you reach out to people and say, hey, I see that you're in this industry, or I see that you are an openly queer business owner, would you mind if I grabbed a coffee with you and maybe I could ask you a few questions? I will always say yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common.
Yeah. So I will also invite you as well that if anybody wants to email additional questions to cass@cglcc.ca, I'm happy to connect you with any of our speakers and to link us there. But remembering that the timer did not start right away, I'm probably now slightly over time despite my best efforts. But that question also is, I think, a great plug for sort of the value of the global program within CGLCC. And I know Daryl's going to make some remarks about this a little bit later as one of the newer expanding programs within the organization, but it certainly gives us an opportunity like today to bring diverse folks from across the globe into conversations that are shared and able to benefit all of us, and it creates that opportunity for the connection between everybody. So I'm very happy to be in this role, and Connie, I'm happy to be, I guess, helping coordinate the interactions of the largest undeclared country in the world, as you put it, with those LGBT numbers. So thank you everybody for coming today, and feel free to email us if you have any other questions or want to connect with anyone. Thank you.
Thank you.